is 4 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Well, my name is Jillian Dale, and I am the East Coast STEM representative for Boxlight. I am a former teacher myself. I taught fourth grade math, and then I taught kindergarten through eighth grade STEM, both in Indiana and then also down in South Carolina. So I'm very excited to be here with you guys today. When I was teaching, I also ran an after-school program called STEM for Girls. And in that program, we did a lot of work in our school garden. So a lot of the things that I'll be talking about today are going to be related back to things that we've already done in the garden and maybe some new ideas that I have for you to get started. So my first question for the audience is, do you have a garden at your school, at your home, or somewhere in your community? And if you just want to use the chat and type in your answer. Okay, so Hannah is growing lots of wildflowers and native plants. Very nice. Me personally, I've got a lot of herbs going right now. We've started growing some carrots, but we haven't had much success on those yet. All right, Brenda, thank you. So you work with a lot of schools that have school gardens. Good. I hope you get some ideas today that you can share with those schools. Awesome. Yes. So lots of people are planting tomatoes too. Very, very popular. And if you have ever been to Indiana, one of the most popular things that they grow is corn. There are cornfields virtually everywhere. Lots of schools are using hydroponics. Yes, that's correct. And aeroponics too is also becoming very popular. Ohio, yes, Ohio is very big on corn. Ohio and Iowa. Sometimes those Midwest states, we compete to see who has the best corn, but I'm a little biased to Indiana corn. Yes, and Illinois, yes, does have very good corn. Okay. All right, so lots of people, lots of schools are getting school gardens. That's becoming a very popular thing. So let's say that you have a school garden. So now what? What do you do with it once you have it? I'm talking activities that you can do in your garden outside of just going and harvesting your fruits and vegetables. So some of the things we're going to be talking about today is just getting your kids out and exploring nature through the garden. We're also going to be talking about some science experiments that you could do in your garden. We'll talk about maybe starting a Garden Bites Club for your students who may not have tried some of these fruits and vegetables that have been grown in your garden. We'll talk about how the garden can also relate to other content areas as well. And then we'll talk about how it can just be used as an outdoor classroom. So the first thing is getting your kids out to the garden, getting them excited about being in nature. And if you attended my STEM for Early Education, then this may look familiar to you. This is called the Square of Life. And what you would do is you would basically go out to the garden and have the kids choose like 1 square foot in the garden. It can be actually in a garden box. It can be on the ground next to the garden box, in a grassy area, wherever. And then you just have them look for life forms within that 1 by 1 square. Now, life forms can be plants, they can be animals. It can be maybe a butterfly that's flying through that square and just in that moment. And encourage your students to use all of their senses. They may be able to discover different things just by using all 5 senses. And then encourage them to look around and see what kind of natural materials they find. All of those are going to get your kids excited about being able to be in the garden, but it's also going to help reinforce some of those skills that we want our students to practice while they're in the garden. For example, bees enjoy gardens. So we have to make sure that we keep our students safe from those bees. So encouraging them to use their sense of sight and their sense of hearing to make sure that they're not getting too close to where a bee might be pollinating. So we also have several experiments and lesson plans that I have completed with students in the garden, and then other ones that I might complete later with students in the garden. For example, on my STEM kits, we have a variety of different lesson plans where students can collect environmental data, and then they can go in and analyze the data that they've collected. We've got lesson plans for kindergarten through 12th grade on environmental data collection that's going to encourage your students to really look at data with an analytical lens. These are problem solving and creative thinking skills that might be harder to teach had you not taken your students out to the garden and had them practice some of these skills. We also have the soil types and pH lesson. This is a great one for students to understand why a garden must have the proper soil in order for the plants to thrive. So this is another one that's also available on my STEM kits. And both of these, they would be done it would be effective to use some kind of sensor with those so that you can collect all of that information. And the lab disc is a great one because it's got all of them built into it and it's auto-calibrated. It's about the size of a smoke detector, so it's very easy for students to carry out to the garden with them. And then my personal favorite that I completed with my students is we actually extracted the DNA from a strawberry using the strawberries that we grew in our school garden. So what we did is we followed step-by-step experiment procedures. And I found these procedures through Steve Spangler on his website, and I'll drop that link into the chat here. He's got a ton of different experiments and inquiry-based activities for the students to do just to help get them excited about science and the scientific method. But what we did here is we had students mash down the strawberries and then they would add different chemical elements to that mixture in order to extract that DNA. And if you look really close at where that green arrow is pointing, it looks like a mucus strand, but it's actually the DNA of the strawberry that we had extracted. So it was very, very cool to watch the students do that, but it was also a really good lesson for them because if they did not follow the experiments step by step, then it didn't come out right. They were not able to actually extract the DNA. So it was a really great way for me to introduce the scientific method to students and then also paying very careful attention to detail. So that one was very, very fun, very memorable. And we also found out that it doesn't have to be strawberries that you can do it with. It can be a lot of different fruits. So that led my students into, well, could we extract the DNA from a banana? And the answer is yes. We were able to follow the same process and also extract the DNA from a banana. We've been told that broccoli also works, but we were not successful with that one. So maybe we'll revisit that a different time. Okay, so my next question for you is, if you have a garden, what would you like to grow? So maybe you have a garden already, or maybe this is something that you've always wanted to grow, but you don't live in the right climate for it. For example, I would love to have a citrus tree, but I can't because I don't live in a tropical climate such as Florida. Hannah loves flowers. I do too. Anything that's going to help out the honeybees or any type of bee, I am all for that. Used to grow herbs when you lived in Florida. Yes, it's very easy to grow vegetables and fruits and herbs in Florida because you have that wonderful climate. But there are some other steps that you may need to take. For example, you may want to use raised garden beds in Florida because that soil may not be the best soil to grow all of your plants. Yes, and edible crops, absolutely. Anything that's edible, we always enjoy growing it. We typically grow tomatoes. We grow a lot of peppers, so like sweet peppers, jalapenos. Those are all very easy to grow. And of course, we love to grow herbs. And with all of that together, we could make our own salsa. So that leads me into my next question. Or sorry, not my next question, but my next set of ideas. So another thing that you can do with your garden is start a Garden Bites club after school, or you could just have your students that are in your regular classroom enjoy the benefits of the Garden Bites club. Now, some of the things that I have made from our garden with our students are roasted sweet potatoes, made them all, threw them in a crock pot, brought them to school so the students could try hot sweet potatoes. Another thing we've done is cucumber water. So it's very important to teach the students to minimize their waste. So one of the things that we did is we peeled a bunch of cucumbers and sliced them up. The students ate the cucumbers, but then they asked, well, what are we going to do with the peels? So we ended up making a very refreshing cucumber water from that. Some of them enjoyed it, some of them did not, but they at least got to try it. And then another thing that you can do is use the herbs in your garden to create an herb mayo. And the herb mayo and a few other recipes are also on biggreen.org. Big Green is the company that my previous school used to help get our school garden started. And they are actually a company that they can help any school get a garden started. They are across the country, so not just in Indiana where I'm from, but they will help. And as you can see in this middle picture, these raised garden beds, that's actually what they install at your school. And they also include some irrigation systems in there as well, making it really, really easy for you to grow lots and lots of high quality fruits and vegetables. Hannah says, love the idea of reducing waste. Have you ever gotten into composting in a garden club? Me personally, I have not done that, but if I would have stayed in my last position, I would have loved to have gotten to that place because that is teaching the kids so many great things about sustainability and reducing waste and making sure that we are, leaving the world better than we found it, which is not always easy to do in today's world. So that is definitely something that can be highlighted in a lot of school and community gardens. Okay. So Garden Club can be used to teach other content areas as well. So you can talk to your students about how plants can benefit from each other. So for example, whenever we plant tomatoes in our garden, we also always plant marigolds around them. Marigolds are great at keeping pests away from your tomatoes, also great about keeping rodents away. I know that in Indiana, we have lots of bunnies that will come through and eat everything in your garden if you don't have something to protect your plants. Marigolds are a great way to help prevent that. Herbs are also natural pesticides. If you can plant a rosemary plant, a few spaces around your garden, that's going to act as a natural pest repellent. So protection against different kinds of bugs that might eat away your plant. Okay. Ezekiel said, are you sharing the slides with us later? I can absolutely send these slides to you later. I know that there's some good links in there that you could share with your students, so I can absolutely share those with you. Okay. So another thing that I love teaching my students about is Native American agriculture, because I do believe that it is truly fascinating, the tips and tricks that we can learn from how farming what existed in Native American times. It is a great way to teach your students. So one of the things that I love talking about is the three sisters or companion planting. So here we can see this picture of corn, and it's got beans growing throughout the corn stalk, and there's also squash growing on the ground. So what you would do is you would take those three plants and essentially plant them like right on top of each other. And what's going to happen is the corn is going to provide structural support for the beans. The beans will be able to vine their way up the corn stalk and have some structural support to help them thrive. And then the beans will also enrich the soil with nitrogen, which the corn desperately needs. And if you live in the Midwest or if you've been out there before, you can always see at the beginning of a crop season, nitrogen tanks being dumped onto the ground so that the corn has that nitrogen. And then also the beans, they're going to act as a weed suppression, and they're also going to help retain some of that moisture so that the beans, the squash, and the corn will always have a reliable water source as well. Now, the garden is also a really ideal learning environment. Number one, it's just fun to get out there and get your kids out there. And especially right now during testing season, if you do have a school garden, this is a great way for your kids to take a break from the classroom, get out of their chairs, go outside, get some fresh air, get some sunshine, and take a break from the stresses of standardized testing. So one thing that I always like to do is we would always take math outside. So here you can see some of my students completing an angles worksheet, just sitting in the garden. We could have done it in the classroom, but they enjoyed it more being in the garden. You can always get students to, they love to draw things that are going on in the garden. Here we were working on measuring the plants. So we measured the space in between the plants. We had measured how high the plants actually grew. They drew diagrams. They wrote all of their data down, and they enjoyed doing that. They were able to get their hands dirty. We were able to get some fresh air, and it was very, very engaging, much better than them just measuring their desk or something sitting on their desk. And the kids always enjoy it. They always have fun out there. You always see their personalities come to life in the garden. And it makes the day more enjoyable for both the students and the teacher. Okay, so some of the things that we've talked about today, they can be found on mystemkids.com. For example, the pH soil sample lesson, we talked about the weather and environmental data collection. So if you'd like to view any of these lesson plans, all you need to do is go to mystemkids.com and thank you. Oh, Hannah, you're the best. So if you go to mystemkids.com and click that blue register activation code, you can use the code that's in the chat or on the slides, MSK Demo Jillian. Please remember that it is case sensitive. And you can sign up for an extended trial of My STEM Kits. You can download some of these lesson plans, use them, and see how you like them. But that's just another great resource that we have that's going to help support your school and community garden. Okay, so next week, Hannah will be talking about how to code your MyBot Recruit screen. So you'll learn about how to add personality and character to your MyBot Recruit just using the screen. So that's going to be on our next STEM Wednesday on April 10th. And you can sign up by going to that link or also by scanning that QR code. There we go. Thank you, Hannah, for putting that in the chat. And that one is too case sensitive, so make sure that you capitalize the STEM, but have the W in Wednesday's lowercase. And that is going to be again at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us about that. Every Wednesday, we do a ton of different STEM topics, from 3D printing to how to do community outreach using 3D printing, to April is National Garden Month. There's always a different slew of topics, not just for Boxlight products, but just to give you all lots and lots of ideas about how to bring STEM into your classroom. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll be around if you have any questions. If not, we'll see you next STEM Wednesday.